Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, I have for you 3 stories, what I like to call stories for the dark. I often come across these really weird, dark, and spooky stories, but oftentimes there's not enough there to make it out to a full, 30-minute video. So how about a little collection for you? Each of these stories is more dark and spooky and disturbing than the last, but in a very different way. So sure, go on. Settle in, grab what you need. Please subscribe if stories for the dark are your thing. Now let's give it a go. In August of 1993, a ship called the Barbel was sailing from London to a city in Germany called Brunsbüttel. Right, it's a port city, it's along the River Elbe. You'd stop off there if you're heading on your way down to Hamburg for a cheeseburger. The Barbel, as you can see here, it's a general cargo ship. It had been built in 1989 in the Netherlands, and as it sailed from London to Germany, on board were 6 souls. You had first mate Viktor Varenko, 34 years of age, cook Anatoly Smolyak, 29, engineer Mikhail Mikhailov, 28, man, his parents really did not care, seafarer Vladislav Bogdan, 24 years of age, and then 28-year-old Andrei Lapin. And then, of course, the captain and the owner of that ship, the Barbel, was one Heinrich Telkmann. He was 50 years of age. He was also the only German, as you probably guessed from the names. The rest of the crew were all Russian. As the ship was setting sail from England to Germany to deliver its cargo, this was August 15th, it was a Sunday, that's when Captain Heinrich Telkmann, he called his wife. His wife, actually, he was mad about it. They were a very, very happily married couple, so much so that he named his ship, the Barbel, after his wife, also named Barbel Telkmann. That's how much they were in love after all these years, and so he rang her up on the phone and said, "Hey, listen, just after leaving London, I'm at the mouth of the Thames. Just gonna head across here." This was a Sunday morning. They were expected to arrive in Germany late on that evening. He says he should be back later on. He'll call you when they arrive back in their port in Germany. This was a very run-of-the-mill operation for the Barbel and its crew. Except that evening, the ship, the Barbel, it didn't reach its destination. It was a no-show in Germany. And Mrs. Telkmann was trying to call her husband, Captain Heinrich, but was getting no answer from him for the rest of that day, that evening, and then the following Monday morning. Still no word and no show from the ship. And as I said, this is, not a big ordeal, very, common shipping route. There should be nothing going wrong here, but it seemed like something had. With no contact, Mrs. Barbel Telkmann, she ended up calling the authorities, reported the ship, that was no show, was no arrival, and so searches began to try and figure out where it had gone and what happened. It would be 3 days after the last word from the Barbel, the ship, that is. The last word came that the first sighting would be made. Now, this was in North Jutland. Jutland is the peninsula that Denmark and sort of some of Germany are on, kind of like that little bit that sticks out. It was in the northern part of that, so the Barbel was way, 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 way off course. It wasn't even discovered by the authorities who had actually gone out to look for it. It was discovered by some Danish fishermen who just happened to stumble across it while looking for fish. It was just sitting there in the ice-cold North Sea. No lights were on, no sign of life coming from the Barbel at all. Just sitting there floating in the water. These small fishing vessels come up, they have no idea what's going on. This was not like an area where a small cargo ship like the Barbel should be. So as they were investigating the area where this ghost ship was, in the distance, just almost on the horizon, they saw this flashing light. They then, headed over to investigate that. And as they get closer, they saw that it was two life rafts. So things were starting now to make maybe a little bit of sense. These were life rafts from the Barbel. They had abandoned ship for some reason or another. But as they got closer then to those life rafts, the 2 life rafts, they didn't find what they were expecting at all. There was 2 life rafts. One of the life rafts was empty. There was nobody in it. The other life raft contained just 1 person. They could see, barely huddled, shaking and huddling under a blanket, only 1 single person in the other life raft. They got closer, and although this person was shaking, huddled, extremely cold on the North Sea, he seemed calm. Kind of like not a bother on him. How is lads? Ahoy there! The Danish fishermen, led by a fella named Soren Larsen, They got this fella onto their fishing vessels, to see if he was okay, what was going on, was he from the Barbel, why did he need to get into a life raft? And he seemed like he was fine. He was in all right shape. I mean, he'd been out on the open sea for a couple of days, but he was grand. He said his name was Andre Lappin, and he was the sole survivor. He told these fishermen that a fire had just broken out on the Barbel, and he had only barely, by the skin of his teeth, managed to get onto a life raft and escape. He didn't really know what happened to the others. He thought he saw them get into a separate life raft, and they just drifted apart. But he wasn't really sure. He wasn't even sure if they were still alive. Now, they had seen the Barbel, and there was no signs of fire from there. They didn't see any fire damage, didn't see smoke coming from it, and it was still floating, other than it being a ghost ship, happy as can be. And when they were looking at Andre and the stuff he had, they would say it chilled them to the bone. See, he said he had to do a legger. He had to go, right? The fire burst out really suddenly, so he had to immediately jump and get to safety. He had no time for nothing. He got into a life raft and he said, "See you later." In fact, remember, he had 2 life rafts, so he really didn't give a shit. He was like, "Alright, you're on your own." But on the life raft, well, I guess he was having himself a little party on the life raft. He was there, he had a pillow, a duvet, so he was tucked in. He had 6 cans of peaches, a whole load of cans of Coca-Cola. So while he was escaping a fire which may have claimed the lives of his, all his other crewmen, all his other brothers at sea, he somehow had enough time to grab all of this and throw it into his little boat. He was also holding onto tightly what appeared to be bags. Now, the Danish fishermen eventually were able to search these bags themselves, and in one of those bags they found 60,000 Deutschmarks. 60,000 Deutschmarks back at that time. In today's money, that's about 56,000 euro or $60,000. So he had a nice chunk of change in him. He also had his time to get his passport, I guess, and he also had gotten the ship's papers. That's a lot for somebody who was allegedly in a rush to get off a ship that was on fire. And then when the fisherman called a helicopter to try and get him and bring him back to land, he refused to go on. He would not go on. He was like, I just want to chill here with you lads, have a great time, Eventually, they managed to get him on, and he went back to Denmark. The Barbel was then towed to a port called Esbjerg, right? And there it was examined. Some forensic technicians, authorities, police, they went on board. And what they saw was highly disturbing. Not so sure about the fire, but something bad had definitely happened on board. There was blood everywhere. The captain's cabin was all smashed up and messed up. There was blood spatter on the walls, the floors. There was hair and skin still stuck to the walls in places. They found a torn scalp of one of the sailors. They were able to deduce from the scene that the ship's crane had been used to lift up bodies and that they had likely been thrown out to sea. They did find spilled diesel around the place as if somebody had tried to start a fire, but diesel, it's not like gasoline, it's not going to go up in flames, so the fire never really took. So a hell of a lot more had happened than what our boy Andre over here, was yapping away with. But he was still sticking to his story. No, it was a fire. Blood? What you talking about? He was saying they'd gotten into a life raft and they'd likely just drift off. Maybe he had a nosebleed while they were running. Who knows these things? He never seemed to show any emotion or really kind of give a shit about what happened to him. He's like, meh, who knows where they gone. Anyways, Andre was then questioned again and again multiple times. He was confronted with the blood evidence. The fact that the money he had, the 60,000 Deutschmarks, were taken, more than likely taken from the ship itself. It's believed that money had been in the captain's cabin. It was the money the Captain Heinrich Telkman would have used to pay his sailors. And Andre had just somehow gotten a hold of it. He was also wearing Captain Heinrich's watch. And so confronted with all of this, his story kind of began to change. Just a little bit. Now, not really much is known about Andre except for 2 things. He was the newest member of the crew, had been there for little more than a week, and he had been an officer in the Red Army. And now his story was going a little something like this. A mutiny had broken out on board the Barbel. He had walked into one of the cabins, and 2 of the other sailors had been arguing, shouting, and eventually fighting with the captain. Andre sees, woof, moron. He runs out of there to go get the cook, to try and bring him back to maybe help the captain, calm these 2 unruly sailors down. By the time Andre and the cook get back, though, to the cabin, the captain is dead. He had taken an axe to the noodle. Then Andre and the cook were being attacked by these 2 guys. The cook, it was too late for him. Andre then ran, and so began this little game of cat and mouse. Andre was Solid Snaking, Metal Gear Soliding his way around the barbell while he was being hunted by these two guys with axes, and somehow he managed to take him down separately, quite covert-like. And so, well, everybody in the ship was now dead, apart from Andre, so he thought, you know what, nobody's gonna believe me. If I call and radio for help and bring the ship, nobody's gonna believe this ludicrous story of a mutiny and then him, under sieging. He's a real Steven Seagal character, this guy. Him under sieging his way out of this situation. So he was like, you know what I'll do? I'll just throw the bodies overboard, try set this on fire, and just another job well done. So he threw the 5 bodies overboard and left on the life raft. And decided he would make himself comfortable with a little pillow and a little blankie and some cans of Coke and just watch the world go by. So obviously this made no sense whatsoever, and Andre was charged with 5 counts of murder, and then he was deported from, extradited from Denmark back to Germany. And it was 1 month after this all had gone down, the entire incident, that Captain Heinrich Telkmann's body was found. Some fishermen just happened to catch it in their net, and when they found Heinrich's body, he'd been in the water too long to tell conclusively how he had died, but he still had bits of iron tied to his body. So it's believed that after Andre killed everybody, he tied iron to them, used the crane, in you get. None of the other bodies of his other sailors, the 4 other sailors, have ever been found. Andre's trial began in September 1994, just over a year after the murders took place. And he was acquitted on all charges, the 5 counts of murder. The court simply decided that, well, there was no evidence, real evidence, there was no witnesses to what happened. Any evidence against Andre was purely circumstantial, so they couldn't kind of definitively say he had murdered the 5 others. The families of his victims saw Andre walk out of the court a free man. He was even, get this, he was even allowed to keep the 60,000 Deutschmarks, which were clearly the captain's money. It was the money Heinrich Telkmann was going to use to pay his crew. Walked out with that because Andre Lappin changed his story about where that money had come from. Now, even though it was clearly the captain's money, he was now saying he had made it selling Russian religious icons. So, give what back? He was the newest crew member. He'd been a crewman on the Barbell for a little more than a week. What likely happened was he had snuck into the captain's cabin to try and steal that money. Heinrich maybe found him, confronted him. They would say, that the captain's cabin was the hell of a mess, more so really than anywhere else. There had been some kind of confrontation and he killed the captain and maybe went and killed the others. Or perhaps, it's kind of unlikely he would be able to kill 5 people, even if he had been armed with an axe. Hunting 5 people on a boat sounds kind of ludicrous. So maybe he was working with another one of the Russian crewmen and he betrayed him. They betrayed each other or something like that. But yeah, it's a tale of a mad axeman on a ship. Today he is a free man. In an interview done with him in 2019, it says he lives now in Kaliningrad, Russia, with his wife and his 2 kids. He works as a rescue diver for the Russian government, 250 rescue missions under his belt, and he paints in his spare time. He's quoted as saying, "It is not fun to need to kill, and I would rather prefer to have avoided that. I feel sorry for the families of those I killed, but I do not regret it. If I had not killed those 2, I would not have been alive today." Still sticking with his story that he only actually killed 2 people. That he only killed the mutineers. The mutineers killed everybody else. The ship, the Barbell, still operates today, though under a different name. After, the incident, everybody was killed. The ownership of the Barbell went to Heinrich Telkmann's wife, Barbell Telkmann, and so she was the owner of the ship. And when Andre Lappin was acquitted of the murders of the captain of that ship and the crewmen of that ship, he reapplied for a job on the Barbell. Surprisingly enough, he did not get that job. What happened on that boat is a mystery, something we will probably never ever know, unless, that is, Mr. Lappin decides to speak, but then if he does, can we really believe him? Womp womp, he's hiding something. He's definitely hiding a lot. And speaking of hiding a lot, if you didn't want your online presence to be discovered, to be tracked, what would you use? The only answer is NordVPN. That's what I used when I was researching these stories and almost every single video you have seen on this channel. I use NordVPN because nothing is truly worse than seeing this content is not available in your location. Frankly, I just won't put it, I just won't have it, right? But thankfully I don't have to with Nord. I tried out a few different VPN providers because there's a few out there in the game, but once I switched to Nord, I never went back. It's not only the most reliable, the safest, the best value for your Spondulux, it's just the best. And not only that, Nord doesn't only keep your location safe and secure, hiding your IP address, Nord also has incredible features, like Nord's Mesh Net, where you can safely connect to any other device in the world. Need to share files? Do so safely with Nord. Or how about a password manager, a data scanner? Or how about Nord's threat protection that keeps you safe from any hackers, malicious websites, trackers, phishing, and ransomware. Nord's goal is and always has been to make the internet better than it is right this very second, free from online threats, surveillance, and censorship, because that's three things. Listen, online freedom is something we can all get behind. So, become safer with a click by downloading NordVPN today. And if you use my special little link, that is nordvpn.com/thatchapter, you can get an exclusive deal. Exclusive means just for you. I was just yapping away to Mr. Nord there the other day. He said you're their favorite. Look at you. If you get a NordVPN 2-year plan, guess what? You get 4 months for free. So get that 2-year plan. Get those 4 months for free at nordvpn.com/thatchapter and have a better internet today. Thank you so much to NordVPN for sponsoring this whole video. Now on to our next story, which is, buckle up. It was very late, or very early, depending on how you view it, at around 3 a.m. on September 8, 1994, that a young Korean couple were driving down the highway on a dark, desolate road just outside of Seoul, South Korea. The couple, 37-year-old Lee Jong-won, a musician, and his girlfriend, 27-year-old Lee Jong-soo, had been casually seeing each other for a while. In fact, it's kind of believed they were having an affair. And so they were looking for a motel just to crash at. They were driving Jong-won's Hyundai Grandeur, which is a very high-end model of Hyundai that executives and rich people would drive. It's almost like a car that was a little too fancy for the two people who were in it. In fact, it's believed that Lee Jong-won had borrowed it from somebody else. However, as they were driving, Lee Jong-won noticed something in his rear view mirror. What was that? So it was a pair of headlights. And they were quickly and steadily gaining on him. They're driving until basically they were riding his ass. This car was riding his ass and he started getting a bit worried. It's the middle of the night, very desolate area. Who would be doing this? He wasn't exactly holding up traffic. This continued for a long ass time. The two occupants eventually okay. They actually wanted to pull over at one point when all of a sudden the car that was behind them suddenly revved up and went around them, pulling in front of them, stopping their progress. Then looking behind them, they saw there was a second car blocking them in. They were trapped. Then a group of young men dressed in black all jump out of the truck and surround their car. They start beating on it, trying to break the windows, trying to open the doors, shouting at the young couple, screaming at the couple to get out. Eventually they busted through a window and started dragging them out of this Hyundai Grandeur. At one point, Lee Jong-won actually got stabbed by one of these guys, but it wasn't a deep stab wound. They dragged the couple out of the car and into their truck, and off they went into the dark of night. Next thing the couple knew was that they were in this dark, dank, concrete building. It stinks, it was dirty, and it was cold. They were in the basement. It was clear they were very far from help. They were in fact being held in a cage. There was iron bars all around them, and near them enough they could see an industrial incinerator. They were not in a good situation. These young men were outside the cage and they then began demanding money. It became pretty clear that this would have been a kidnapping for ransom or an extortion attempt. But well, unfortunately, Lee Jong-won and Lee Jong-soo were not exactly, high earners. Jong-won was a musician, which probably means he's just broke. And Jong-soo worked in a cafe. So they didn't really have any money at all. This came as quite a surprise to the kidnappers, who were known as the Chijon Family. They were called the Chijon Family, but they were not related, though they did shed blood together. See, the Chijon family had picked this young couple specifically because of the car they were driving, a Hyundai Grandeur, which is usually only driven by, business executives, rich celebrities, that kind of stuff. Like, only rich people have this car. What are you guys doing with it? Oh, you borrowed it? Shit. Then, one of the kidnappers brought some food to the female victim, Lee Jong-soo, and, it was some bread and some milk. Kind of like, she thought, just trying to be kind of nice to her. Now I guess your appetite does not get the high when you're being kidnapped and held in a dark, dirty basement. She declined. She said, thanks, I'm good. The kidnappers then said, you're turning down food? Well, then you must be rich. Only a rich person would turn down food. They then decided that this couple must die. But they wanted to make it a sick little game. They wanted Lee Jong-soo to murder her boyfriend, Lee Jong-won. Not only for their own amusement and a sick game they could play, but they wanted her to kill him so that she wouldn't run away and, tell the police she would be implicated as a killer. They then forced Lee Jong-won to drink a shitload of soju so he would be drunk and kind of like out of it. Then they got his girlfriend Lee Jong-soo to hold a bag over his head till he suffocated. Now, obviously, she didn't wasn't too keen on doing that, but they just held their hands over her hands till they killed him and he suffocated with his head inside a bag. This all happened in this dark, dank, dirty basement while they were laughing the whole time. They then took his body, put it back in the car, the Hyundai Grandeur, and pushed it off a cliff. Then they assaulted Lee Jong-soo. But they forced her to come back with them. They forced her to be a member of the Chijon family, this sick little family. The Chijon family was made up of 7 people, all men, all in their early 20s. There would later be a female member too, but she was kind of really just there as one of the girlfriends of one of the members. They all worked in construction or in factories. Almost all had prior convictions to joining the gang, and they were led by the ringleader, Kim Gi-hwan. Kim Gi-hwan was a very smart guy. He was really intelligent, he was always top of the class, but he ended up working in factories. It seems he had a real vendetta against corruption in universities. It seems like some kind of scandal had come out now that, if you want to get into the best universities and therefore likely get the best jobs from that, well, your brown envelopes are a little bit more important than the grades you got. So rich people were just paying their way into these great jobs, these great schools, and a smart guy like Kim Gi-hwan who couldn't get in, well, he took that personally. He had a real issue with wealthy folk, and then he met a few others who had the same, and so the Chijon family was formed. The others probably didn't have his ideals. They were all convicts, likely led a life of crime, who just wanted money. But they pooled their finances together and bought rifles, blades, dynamite, vehicles, and they were gonna eat the rich. I mean that literally. They were gonna eat. There's cannibalism in this story. They had a doctrine, right? 3 rules that this family had to live by. 1 was we hate the rich. 2, a traitor to the group must be killed. 3, don't trust women, not even your mother. What did your mom do? They would train together, go hiking, climb mountains, all in preparation of this plan of killing and eating the rich that they were gonna do. Their plan was to get about $1.2 million altogether. And so, by the summer of 1993, they started looking for their first victim. They would cruise around the streets looking for rich people they could kidnap and extort, and, well, torture too. And they would try find the cars only rich executives and celebrities drove and follow them. Their first victim was a woman known only as Miss Choi, and they simply saw her walking down the sidewalk near a train station late one night. Miss Choi was not rich. She was a farmer's daughter. But, well, they viewed what they would do to her as, they practice. That's what they were planning on doing. They kidnapped her, they took her to a remote location, they all assaulted her, and then they strangled her to death. They then just left her there on the side of a hill in the remote Korean countryside, and they would do this all as a group, so that every member of the family would be implicated, and therefore less likely to turn the others in. Funnily enough, their first victim actually leads to their second, Song Bong-un, who was in fact a member. He was one of the guys in the family after they had brutally attacked and murdered Miss Choi. Song Bong-un was racked with guilt. He just couldn't believe. He was overwhelmed by what they had done to her. He thought this was gone way too far, and he actually wanted to go to the police. So what he did was he just ran away. He fled the group. Problem with that, though, was rule number 2. A traitor to the group must be killed. And it turned out that Song Bong-eun was also the treasurer of the family. He took 3 million Korean won with him. He was later found at a relative's house. The rest of them, Chijon Family, they took him, they brought him, they tortured him, and they shot him in the head. Shortly after this, they purchased and did up, if you can call it that, a house, later called the murder house. They put in an incinerator in it, they put cages in it, they turned it into a house of death. They did this near the southwestern city of Gwangju. It was like in a remote place in the countryside. Next thing you know, though, their dear beloved leader, Kim Gi-hwan, he was arrested. It turned out he had assaulted the niece of a friend of his, and the police, they arrested him, they imprisoned him for sexual assault. See, it turns out that Kim Gi-hwan, for all his idealism of eat the rich and the rich is screwing us over, so we gotta screw them back. For all of that, he just needed some kind of moral justification to act out his sick fantasies, because he was nothing more than a depraved predator who should have been locked away for a long time. So pretty soon the group was without its leader, but that didn't slow him down, because one lonely night when they were driving around looking for rich people, didn't they just happen to see a Hyundai Grandeur driving by itself at about 3 a.m. And now they had another victim who would soon become a member of the Chijon family, Lee Jong-soo. About a week later, on September 13th, 1994, a wealthy couple, factory owners, they were kidnapped while attending to some graves of their family. They were cleaning out the weeds and all that sort of thing, and well, these guys are rich, let's nab them. They took them, popped them in their truck, drove to their murder house and demanded 100 million won. They said, you give us that, we'll let you go. Only problem was, these were pretty wealthy, but they only had 80 million won on them. And now in today's money, that's about $130,000. But the kidnappers said, okay, it's a start towards, where we eventually want to go. So the factory owner says, okay, just give me some time and I can get it for you. He calls up the financial guy from the factory that he owned. And is like, listen, I need you to get money. It's the factory's money, but I need it. I've been he makes up some excuse that he needs to meet him in Gwangju with the money. He said he had been in a drunk driving accident or whatever. But regardless of this financial guy believes him, he grabs the money and he goes to Gwangju to meet him, hand over the cash. So they meet up in the city of Gwangju. The gang, they're all peeking out of a van, kind of very creepily. The factory owner guy, he gets out. He sees his head of finances with a bag full of money, and he hands it over to the factory owner, who in turn gives it to the gang, expecting, that he now, having given over the ransom, he'll be released and his wife will be released. Only the gang says, no. They grab him, they reef him back into the van, they slam the door. The other employee hears screaming and he just sees the van tear off. So the employee, the finance guy who witnessed all of this, who handed over the money, is freaking out, as you can imagine, right? And so he calls the cops, which doesn't really help very much, because the first cops he calls say, oh, it's not our jurisdiction. The second cops he calls say, oh, that sounds kind of like just some scheme they had. This couple were just stealing money from their own company, and we're going to, leg it. They were going on the run together, and they invented this whole kidnapping plot. Wouldn't worry about it. In the meantime, the couple were brought back to the murder house and back down into the basement. The gang weren't going to let them go. They'd seen where they lived. They'd probably seen their faces. And now they had the money they had killed before. Why not do it again? They made their victim, now forced accomplice, Lee Jong-soo, to shoot the husband in the chest, which she did. Then they attacked both this couple with knives and with axes, butchering them down in that basement. The gang then fires up the incinerator in said basement, but thinks, you know what, before, let's have a little nibble. As they were dismembering this wealthy couple, they started eating them, and they forced Lee Jong-soo, again, who was their victim, now they're forcing to be accomplice, to eat the man's liver. Now you might be wondering, why didn't, Lee Jong-soo run away? Why didn't she try and escape? Well, they were constantly assaulting her and beating her up and were in her head. They had told her that the Chijon family, There was thousands of them all across Korea. So if she did manage to get away, she did manage to escape, we'll find you. Somebody will find you, capture you, bring you back. The family had plans to keep going. They'd even purchased a mailing list from a disgruntled employee at a Hyundai department store, which is a very exclusive, high-end department store. And the mailing list, basically it had a list of the top dogs, the guys who came into this department store and spent the biggest spondulix, that had the names of these people and their addresses. Essentially, for a family that's looking to kill rich people and steal their money, this is like, here you go. Here's your next. Here's a to-do list. May as well be. So this gave the gang, minus their beloved leader, who was still in prison at this point, their next, what they're doing next. But sadly for them, they didn't get that far. The gang didn't want to keep going without Kim Gi-hwan, so they planned to break him out of prison using dynamite. But unfortunately, while practicing the use of dynamite, Lee Jong-soo and another guy, they got injured, so they had to go to the hospital. And then while at the hospital, Lee Jong-soo, having just a couple of seconds by herself, she booked it out of the hospital and jumped into a taxi. She had stolen some money from the gang while running away. She got on a taxi. She then managed to go rent a car. She drove, went to a motel, and hid out there. She was actually too scared to go to the police because she thought the police might be in on this. So she called a friend who went to the police for her. The police initially, they didn't believe her. They thought she was high on drugs or something. But then when she started mentioning these people who had started disappearing, well, pretty quickly they believed her and they swept in on the gang and they arrested them all. The entire gang would end up being sentenced to death for their actions, for the murders they had committed. The only person who wasn't sentenced to death was the girlfriend, who was only kind of sorta a member of the gang. None of them ever showed any remorse, only saying they wished they had killed more rich kids.
네, 정말 지금 심정 어때? 자, 자, 스트 이렇게 줘야 되죠? 알았어요. 지금
괜찮아 생각해. 나 진짜 죽일 사람 따로 있었는데 엉뚱한 사람만 죽인 것 같아. 정말 죽일 사람 못 죽여서 한이 맺혀. 돈 많은 사람 못 죽였어.
이 집은 무슨 돈으로 지었어요? 사서하고 집 지은 거. 네? 얼마나 받았어요? 노가다한 돈으로 집 졌단 말이에요? 네. 어머니 모시라고 어머니 모시라고 쓰세요. 어머니한테 어떻게 그랬어요? 어머니 되세요. 저기 어머니 되세요. 범인은 나랑이 주소 나랑이.
내 사람 못 죽여서 한이 맺혀.
자, 쓰지 나와줘. 에이씨. 정말로. 자, 쓰지 나와줘. 자, 쓰지 나와줘. 이제 그만하고. 하나하고 나가. 하나만 이거 같은 책. 앉아. 될거 아니야. 잘 먹었어요.
인간 죽이려고. 야, 바로 세워.
집안 아까 나왔어. 누구를 죽였어? 누구를? 죽이고 싶었는데. 잘났는데? 지금 잘난 놈들이라는 사람들한테 하고
그만합시다.
말씀하세요.
It was only 1 year after they were arrested in 1995 that all were executed. Lee Jong-soo would never face any charges, as she was a victim of the gang herself. In fact, Lee Jong-soo, it's not even her real name. That's never been revealed. She stayed away from any publicity until 21 years had passed. That was until 2015, and says she still suffers from PTSD to this very day. It was late in the evening of March 21st, 2010, that Mauricio Gebara and his two daughters, 7-year-old Lisette and 4-year-old Paulette, returned home to their apartment in Wixquiluguan, just outside of Mexico City. They arrived home and both the young girls were getting tucked into bed by their mother, also named Lisette, who she hadn't gone on this trip with her husband and her two daughters, but she had been out of town as well, arriving home just the same day. Now, the family, they were pretty rich and prominent. Lisette, she was the daughter of a very successful businessman. She'd gone to, all the best private schools. She, in fact, had gone on and studied and become a lawyer. Her husband, Maurizio, he was a very successful businessman in real estate. So, they had this big, beautiful apartment in the city, just outside of Mexico City, and, two daughters. Life was good. So Mom Lisette tucked daughter Lisette into bed, gave her a kiss, and turned out the light. Then she went into her younger daughter, Paulette's room, and did the exact same, read her little story, then tucked her in, gave her a kiss on the forehead, walked over, turned out the light, before going into her own room and getting some Z's in. Fast forward then to the next morning, and their two nannies, count them too, they had two nannies and they arrived. You know, they came in early to their apartment and started cleaning up, started cooking up breakfast for the family that Monday morning. So one of the nannies was cooking up the breakfast, and she's looking over at the clock and can see, you know, it's starting to get late morning, so she decides she better wake up the girls for school that day. She first went into Lisette's room and got her up, and then she went into Paulette's room. She called out her name, no answer, and assumed she must be, you know, still asleep in bed. She couldn't really see her, so she walked over closer to the bed, pulled down the duvet, and still couldn't see her. She then looked around the room, and she still couldn't see her. She then walked out of the bedroom and looking around the rest of the apartment, asking the other nanny if she'd seen her. No one had seen her. She wasn't in the apartment. This is a 4-year-old girl. And something you need to know about 4-year-old Paulette is that she was developmentally disabled. She could barely walk, no more than a few steps at a time, and she could only speak a few words. She'd been born at only 25 weeks. Well, only 25 weeks, so the doctors didn't even give her a chance. But somehow, against all odds, you know, she had made it. They said she would never walk. She somehow managed to, you know, was able to walk. She wasn't intellectually disabled at all. She just was physically unable to really do even some simplest tasks, not by herself. So her not being in the apartment was startling, to say the least. The nanny immediately then went to the parents. They didn't have a clue what was going on. She started searching the entire apartment. The entire apartment turns into the entire apartment building, going floor by floor, looking to see Paulette. Not seeing her. It was as if she had just vanished from her own bed, like been abducted or something. The family's obviously freaking out at this stage. They had no idea where she is. They call the authorities, and this is something, you know, the authorities of course would take very seriously. A missing child is something I think everybody would take very seriously. They had a look around, no sign of her. They checked the doors. Had somebody broken in, abducted her? The locks were all in place. There was no signs of forced entry. They checked the doors, they checked the windows, nothing. They checked the building's CCTV to see if, you know, she had somehow walked out of the apartment in the middle of the night, or more likely, somebody had taken her out of the apartment. But the entire night, from when she'd been tucked into bed, you know, the night before, to the morning when they realized she wasn't gone, there was no sign of anybody walking around their building and exiting. This soon, as you can imagine, became major news. It was everywhere. Missing posters, flyers, on the TV, everything. Even though there was no real evidence of it, it was immediately assumed to have been an abduction. Someone must have taken her. The Attorney General's office would even get involved in publicizing this case. It would become one of the biggest missing persons cases in Mexico. Hundreds would take part in the search for the young girl, on the streets, online, in nearby Mexico City. Lisette and Mauricio, the parents, they would go on TV and make very public pleas to whomever had stolen Paulette. Please, please just bring her back safely, whatever the cost. They would do interviews from the home, reconstructions, everything, in the hopes it might bring some little nugget to light as to where she had gone.
¿Qué pasó? Yo acosté a mi hija a dormir, alrededor...
En esta cama. ¿Cuántos días lleva desaparecida?
Desde el domingo en la noche.
Y hoy
No sé ni a qué día estamos.
Hoy es viernes.
Hoy es viernes.
¿Tienes alguna idea?
Yo lo único que quiero es que aparezca mi hija.
Pero no tienes alguna idea.
Ya no tengo ideas.
Aquí estamos en un segundo piso.
Sí.
Tuvieron que haberla bajado de la cama,
Sí.
cargado para bajar escaleras y sacarla del edificio. Y sin que ella hiciera ruido.
Sí.
Iría dormida.
Sí. O la durmieron, no sé.
O la durmieron.
Porque la niña no se va con extraños.
Entonces sería alguien conocido.
Probablemente.
However, as this huge, massive search effort is ongoing, the police start thinking and start edging towards the one explanation that would make sense. The one explanation, we're all thinking it. The parents are lying. Something happened that night that they are not saying. If it wasn't somebody from outside the home, it's got to be somebody within the home. A little girl doesn't just vanish. This isn't a missing 411 video, so a little girl doesn't just vanish. The police began looking more and more at the parents.
Nos vamos a unir y vamos a encontrar esa niña y de verdad se los voy a agradecer infinitamente.
It was a week after Paulette went missing that the police detained both parents and the two nannies and began questioning them, more accusatory questioning. What did you do with her? What really happened that night? We know you're not telling the truth. What happened? Somebody doesn't just vanish like this.
Entonces esa noche de domingo usted ya la trajo aquí a que se acostara.
The police had been watching them the entire time and thought their reactions were not what you would expect. They didn't seem emotional or anxious, really that upset at all. Even in some interviews making jokes about what could have happened, kind of making light of the situation of their own daughter going missing. It truly seemed like they were hiding something. They had people coming and going from their apartment the entire time, like hundreds. The scene, the crime scene, the bedroom, was never like properly forensically examined. When they had forensic experts in, they just checked the entryways and exitways of the apartment, not like the apartment itself. Lizette had even done interviews on the bed, which could have, DNA on it. It could have fingerprints on it, hair on it, who knows? They even had a family friend come in and sleep in that bed after Paulette went missing. It truly had become contaminated when they even brought dogs in, like cadaver dogs and search dogs, into the apartment, into the bedroom. The dogs didn't pick up anything. That's how contaminated the scene was. If some violence had happened, any evidence was either destroyed by incompetence on the police's part at the very start of the investigation, or by parents who simply didn't know any better or had reason to destroy it. The police did come out though and say they had falsified statements, that they had lied during the course of the investigation. But what had they lied about? In the meantime, the police were going back to the very, very beginning, because this ain't making no sense. On March 30th, 9 days after Paulette went missing, they went back into her bedroom to do a reconstruction of events, of what could have happened. And by the way, they had nannies. The nannies come into her bedroom, do a reconstruction of what you exactly did that day. They were just trying to piece together what could have possibly happened. I mean, this is a girl who can't walk by herself, so what's going on? And as they were placing blankets on the bed and slowly removing them, they noticed kind of like a lump at the bottom of the bed. It was in that space between the bed and the footboard. It was a very, very small, tight space. It was something they hadn't noticed before. Then they began to notice a smell emanating throughout the room. It was a smell of putrefaction. Slowly removing the blankets at the bottom of the bed, between the bed mattress itself and the footboard, they noticed the lump becoming a figure, becoming a body, a small body. It was Paulette. She had been in the bed the entire time. It was a horrific, horrifying discovery. The autopsy would say that, well, it was weird when they found her. The finding of her was filmed, but I'm not going to show you that much of it because I'm not a psychopath. But one of the technicians who was there would say she had been severely beaten. But this was then retracted later on and saying, no. And then the medical examiner would say she had died via asphyxiation. Down there, she had, maybe she in bed, she'd been tossing and turning in her own bed. She'd somehow fallen down the end of the bed between this little crack and just been unable to get out and had suffocated down there. And then somehow, by some miracle, nobody noticed this for 9 days. They'd done interviews on that bed. A person had slept in that bed. Nothing. The many blankets and stuff that was on the bed, it covered up her body, it covered up the smell. That's why even when cadaver dogs went into that bedroom, they didn't alert to anything there. So all that is the official story, and charges were never filed against anybody. It was basically ruled, an accident, death by misadventure, whatever you want to call it. Later on, Paulette's parents would split up and publicly accuse the other of having killed Paulette. See, it also should be noted that the father, Maurizio, he was actually good friends with the district attorney, who some people believe may have been covering up what actually happened. In fact, the district attorney would later resign, kind of in disgrace, over this entire event, because there was so much outcry over, well, A, if that's actually what happened, that's incredible incompetence that nobody's seen her. And B, a lot of people don't believe that's what happened. And Mauricio didn't even attend his daughter's funeral. The two nannies who had been in the house that morning, who noticed that Paulette wasn't there, they would say, you know, they had come in, they had been changing the blankets in that bed constantly. As I said, another person had slept in that bed since they said she was definitely not there. They would have noticed if there was a dead body, come on, if they were there. So they said she wasn't there before. That likely she had been kept somewhere else and then placed there. The friend who slept in the bed didn't notice it, didn't smell anything. The discovery of the body has also been kind of doubted. Right, as I said, you can find the video of it, it's on YouTube, of them, the technicians, filming this reconstruction and then finding the body during the reconstruction. What was weird is that, why were they doing another reconstruction of, I mean, it's a bed. It's not exactly like a very complicated crime scene that you need to do a reconstruction of. Also, that was filmed at 2 a.m. Why were technicians in the bedroom doing the reconstruction at 2 a.m.? That's weird. Then they would just say, like, it all seems rehearsed. Like, the technicians were rehearsing this. Even the one who said it looks like she's been beaten. That this whole scene was staged. Some people think that Paulette was killed, you know, that night, that her body was hidden elsewhere, and then, they brought her back in the middle of the night, oh, we found her, you know, or something like that, that maybe she had been killed for some kind of ransom, or that out of jealousy, and that they just wanted to cover up. Paulette's mother, Lizette, she would always say she had such a hard time raising her because she had various disabilities and stuff like that, or something like that, so maybe she just killed her. Who really knows what happened? But this does not make any sense. If the police were working in collusion with the family, who were a wealthy family, we'll never really know the truth. A very strange case of a little girl ending up in her own bed, tragically, and horrifyingly and also mysteriously, if that's what really happened. Thank you so much for watching. It means a lot to me, as always, that you're here. Hope you enjoyed this old video, Stories for Dark. Let me know your thoughts, and I could do a lot more of these because I'm always coming across stories I would love to tell you, but you know, oftentimes I feel like it's just not enough there to make a full video out of it. So making maybe these little compilation videos would be cool and interesting. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this old video. But, you know, until the next old one, which will be up in a couple of days, please look forward to that. Please check out the That Chapter podcast. If you're looking for new stories, every week, every Monday, there's a brand new episode of the That Chapter podcast. Got some great ones coming up, and there's a hell of a lot, over 70 there already. Almost all of them are exclusive podcast-only stories that you can find only on the That Chapter podcast, so give it a go. But until the next old episode, please, as always, take care of each other and yourselves. Because I love you. My kid.